My dude Puka Nacua was absolutely balling. Serious hat tip to Sean McVay and the Rams staff. What do you think the encore looks like?
But what if he has like 1,207, you know?
Disappointment.
I'm just curious if like there's going to be an evolution, right? If there's going to be like a next step here.
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
Maybe the greatest catch I've ever seen.
I want to start here with Puka Nacua, man. 17 games, 105 receptions on 160 targets, 1486 through the air, 6 touchdowns. This man set a rookie record in both receptions and yards. He averaged a 65% catch rate with a 14.2 yards per reception. My dude Puka Nacua was absolutely balling. The thing about your profile, Matt, and the line that really jumped out to me, and I could not agree more with this, you called him, quote, devastating middle of the field receiver. And I totally agree with that. I mean, when we start talking about that dig route, when you and I love talking about that dig route, that's where this guy lives, man, thrives on the in-breaking route in the intermediate area of the field.
Yeah, that was apparent right away, really, from week one. And it's funny, like you bring up you and I talking about the dig route and obsessing over it. I actually asked Puka Nacua about, this at the Super Bowl when I got a chance to talk with him.
Yeah.
I said, "What's your favorite route to run?" You can find the interview. I think the full interview is on Yahoo Sports YouTube. I put a section of it, this section I'm talking about, up on Twitter and on my Drake London YouTube breakdown, actually, where you can find this conversation. I asked him, "What's your favorite route to run?" And he said the dig off a dagger concept. So he's in on the dig route, baby. And then I was like, I mentioned to him about reception perception and how I could kind of show that, like, yeah, that's his. One of his most commonly run routes, 21.3% of his sampled routes were a dig route. He had a 75.4% success rate. He's extremely good running those dig routes, whether it's man zone coverage. And, that's a funny thing, like, about him, just very early on, like I said, right away, it was apparent that he was good, working the middle of the field. To me, like, if you go back and look at some of the write-ups I did on him early in the season, right? Because obviously the biggest Puka Nacua stan in the world coming into last year's draft. And I really liked Puka. You can go back and again
100%.
Read things, listen to things I talked about him. He had a very good reception perception. Actually, ironically, we're talking about the rookie roundup. He was in last year's rookie roundup. The mini
That's
sample
exactly
results on him were very good. Again, regardless of how high you were on Puka Nacua, nobody saw this coming. Nobody saw this coming this early for sure, but really, like, early on in the season, especially week one against the Seattle Seahawks, he's running like these dig routes against man coverage, against DBs that Seahawks defense was a little disappointing last year, but overall was still a pretty positive unit. So like, those were the things that you saw from him very early on that said, like, oh, this guy is legit. The production is not fluky, right? Those were the debates very early on in the season. Like, was the production just kind of was it a fluke, or is this going to fade away? Is he going to be like who's that random Giants receiver, Kevin Ogletree? Cowboys receiver that tore up the Giants in week one that one year and then never did anything again. Is he going to be the next Kevin Ogletree? Well, no, obviously not. He's going to go on and break rookie records.
Actually surpassed the great Bill Groman of the Houston Oilers, who had 1473 in 14 games back in 1960. I know all the football historians are like, oh yeah, Bill Groman. But again, Puka kind of following in the footsteps of freaking Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, right? Jamar Chase had 1455 in 2021. Justin Jefferson as a rookie had 1400 in 2020. He did that in 16 games. But Puka Nacua, man, 1486 through the air. Used him in a couple of different, gadgety type plays too. But his athletic profile is certainly there was nothing on the athletic profile side that would say, yeah, we're going to use this guy in all these creative different ways. Man, serious hat tip to Sean McVay and the Rams staff for finding the exact perfect role for Puka Nacua here in year one.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing to talk about with Puka Nacua is that this role for him in the Rams offense was just so perfect. It was really a beautiful kind of combination of like a role that the receiver, that the player was kind of destined to play, that was perfectly suited for him, and that this coaching staff and this team was like ready to take advantage of, was ready to like be the team that could do that for the player. I kind of struggle with what, like, if I'm bucketing receivers into types, like what type of receiver Puka Nacua is, because he's definitely he's not a slot, right? He's not Cooper Kupp. He's not a slot receiver. He only took 24.1% of his sampled snaps and reception perception from the slot. He was in the backfield on 11.5%, mostly as like a pre-snap motion option. They do put him in motion a lot to get him kind of running a full head of steam. Because you and I have talked about this previously, James, where like he's. Again, I'm not saying he's slow, but I'm not saying he's fast, but he kind of like sneaks up on you with build-up speed. Like after a while, it's not like he's not the burstiest player in the world, but then the longer he moves, you're like, no, shit, he's scooting.
moving.
Is Puka Nacua, and like putting him in motion is a part of that. Putting him in kind of these stacked alignments, like I mentioned on a dagger concept. That's when like he's off the line of scrimmage as the outside player, and then the inside player there is on the line of scrimmage running a vertical route, so you're clearing out all the space for Puka Nacua, and he just like rumbles after the catch. It really is like a perfect kind of marriage of the player, the scheme, the coach, and then the quarterback too. Like Matthew Stafford has no fear pulling the trigger on these over the middle plays. And again, just to bring it back to like the routes where he's fully running over the middle of the field in reception perception, like the route chart data. 81.8% success rate on slants, 75.4% success rate on digs, which is a great number considering the high volume of dig routes that he's running, which over 21.3% is super high. And then 86.7% success rate on the post route. Those are just crazy numbers for a receiver who's running a lot of these over the middle routes, over 20% on the slant as well, 23%. It's just that amount of volume, that high of success, it just really shows you what type of player he is in this offense specifically. The
way he plays, that lunch pail mentality, toughness on the outside, again, not a huge vertical threat. A lot of his game reminds me so much of what Hines Ward used to do for the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. Again, not super twitchy, but man, you throw this guy the ball in coverage and he's going to go fight for that football. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of those traits that remind me of the great Hines Ward as well. You talk about those dig curls and slants, man. And again, you talked about a middle of the field receiver, devastating in that area. 60% of his routes were on those three intermediate and short routes, right? We're talking the dig, curl, and slant. 60%. As primarily an X receiver, that's pretty impressive. Now, what you don't normally see from an X receiver, Matt, only 15% of his combined were on deeper routes in terms of the 9 post and corner. So again, when we're talking about the 9 post and corner, I want to clarify this, 9 post and corner combined, only 15% route participation. Again, not usual. As a matter of fact, that's very unusual to see from a primary outside X receiver.
Yeah, not usual at all. And like, again, he's 50.4% of his snaps on the line of scrimmage. So he's doing a little bit of X, a little bit of flanker. That's why I say he's like kind of a hard player to categorize. But yeah, if you just took like his route percentage chart and stacked it up with like Hunter Renfro's or something from back in the day, or like Juju Smith-Schuster. Like
I think Juju would be good. Yeah, Juju. Yeah.
These guys that are just like definitely slot receivers, they would look very similar, which is 100%. Why this Rams offense is so like it's kind of odd. Puka Nacua can make big plays. Like don't get me wrong. Like another thing that he was like, oh man, this is a big boy catch. In his first game, like working the sideline on an out route in man coverage. That was another one of those plays from the very first game. It's like, oh, that's real big boy receiver stuff. Like that's not normal for a day 3 rookie to be winning against press man coverage on an out route, and his out route success rate's really high, 80.8% success rate on out routes. That's where he kind of makes some of those bigger plays. He makes plays in contested situations too down the field, even if he's not like the best separator on these vertical routes. But yeah, like I said, he's kind of an odd profile of a player. Like I'm not saying that to say it's a negative, but like if you go up and pull up like Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase's rookie year reception perception profile, and like after they have these big like record breaking seasons or whatever. I mean, shoot, even Odell Beckham back in the day in 2014, like, yeah, that's a number one outside X receiver running. Odell's a little bit of a flanker, but regardless, like these other two guys, Chase and Jefferson, that's like an outside X receiver doing outside X receiver things, running vertical routes, like a true number one. With Puka, it's not quite that. It's and again, I don't say that to be a negative or anything, because the overall success rates, which we haven't mentioned, are good. 73% success rate versus man, 72.2% against press. The zone scores 79.3%. We kind of would like that to be over 80. I do think there was at times where, especially working vertical routes, where that lack of speed shows up a little bit. Like I said, there's some build-up speed when he's crossing the field. I'm talking like straight running 9 routes. That was a little below average. I barely have him doing it though, so it's kind of like, who cares? There are some times when he's working like on curl routes against man coverage or zone coverage where he's a little bit slow to kind of turn back to the quarterback. So like, he's definitely not a flawless player, which I think that's an interesting kind of discussion point for like his future prospects, because like I just wonder. I mean, I don't have to. I guess I don't have to wonder what the expectations are for Puka Nacua this coming season, because like, I know they're high. You look at like any sky high, like any dynasty ranking, any fantasy football ranking, he's obviously going as like a first round player. Everybody like wants to kind of see this encore. I think it's one of the more fascinating ones to track across the entire league, just because, like I said, he's an unusual player. This is definitely the right ecosystem for an unusual player to thrive. I would have said the same thing about Cooper Kupp after his rookie year. He's a very unusual player. His usage was very unusual, and that was even more weird than Puka's, or I should say it was even more unusual than Puka Nacua's, because at least with Puka, you see him doing outside receiver stuff, and like most offenses, we want to see the number one work in the middle of the field. That's exactly what we're getting out of Puka Nacua, like these big elongated routes over the middle of the field from the boundary. That is very in line with today's meta. It's just not quite. It's just like I said, it's a different type of profile.
What do you think the encore looks like? Because as you mentioned, his zone score, I think, was lower than I certainly was anticipating. We like that number to be at about 80% or higher. In terms of success rate, he was at 79.3, so not that far off, but still 56th percentile, but certainly a ways off from being, what we would consider to be a special player against zone, right? So there's that little bit of his profile that's a little bit left to be desired, and again, wasn't great on the 9, was actually quite bad on corner routes. So how much verticality can he add to his game? We're talking about a player, Matt, that needs to surpass, these expectations of, if he gets to 1450 again, that's a W, right? Like, but can he do it again? I guess we'll start there.
Right. Like, but what if he has like 1207,
Disappointment.
Right. That's a disappointment, but like, I guess it matters like how it happens, right? Was Cooper Kupp healthy all season, and like these two were competing for targets, and like Cooper Kupp is looking like the old Cooper Kupp, like, then I guess I don't really care that Puka Nacua, from just like a real life perspective, like has 1207. I think they would still be like a great receiver duo and whatever. But you're right that like expectations for all receivers now it's just so sky high. If Puka goes out and has like that type of season after 1,400 yards, I guess people are going to be disappointed. 105 catches, 1,486 and 6 touchdowns. Yeah, it's going to be tough if he goes, I don't know, 83 catches and 1,200 yards, but like that could happen, and it could still be a pretty successful
100%.
season. And it just depends on how he, I'm much more concerned with how he looks and like, does he expand off of this? Because I think this right here, what we have in this profile is a very, very good, I would say, like number one receiver. And I'm trying to be harsh with what I say is and is not a number one receiver. Like I have now seen evidence, a full year's worth of evidence, that Puka Nacua can do high level things against man and press coverage on critical routes in today's NFL, these over the middle routes, and be the engine, the guy in a good offense's passing game. Like, I think that's enough to consider Puka Nacua a very good number one receiver. Now I'm just curious if like there's going to be an evolution, right? If there's going to be like a next step here, if that comes on vertical routes, if that comes with like an even higher man press score next year. Because I think like, I just don't know, right? We always assume development for players. We always assume like, okay, what they were in year one, like now they're going to take a next step. But like, let's just say this is it for Puka. It's a home freaking run, you know, because he was a 5th round draft pick. And like, if he's just a very good number one receiver, it's a home run. But I think that because the expectations are so sky high, I do think some people could look back on it and be like, wow, that was like, he just leveled off as this guy. But like this guy, this reception perception profile is very, very good.